This meeting is being recorded.
And while Carol sets up, just to say we really welcome questions. Carol's going to present, then Jeff, and then we will have the opportunity for Q&A, but do keep putting your questions in the chat box because that helps the debate go. Thank you. Carol.
Yep, can everyone see the screen? Fine. Oh, actually, let me. Yep, still see. Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. I am Carol. I'm from UK Power Networks. I'm the flexibility markets developer working in the energy markets team at UK Power Networks. I'll be presenting today, but my colleague Jason and Zahin will also join me in the Q&A session at the end. Yes, and we welcome all the questions, but we'll answer all the questions in the end. So, sorry. Bit slow. Yeah, a little bit about UK Power Networks. So we are one of the 6 network distribution network operators in GB. We cover London, East England, Southeast England, as you can see on the map here. We serve roughly 90 million people. That's MPAN customers. That's all the people within that region, and that is about 29% of the GB total, and we have almost 10 gigawatts of distributed generation connected, which is roughly a third of the UK total, and our peak demand is about 16 gigawatt. So it's a little snapshot about UK Power Networks. As a company, we operate within a set of visions. So, we strive to be an employer of choice. We look after our people, a respected and trusted corporate citizen. So we look after our communities, which is very relevant when we talk about net zero and, kind of leaving no one behind in the transition. And, as with any transition, it comes with a cost. So we also aim to be sustainably cost efficient. And again, this is very relevant to today's topic in how, we believe that kind of the flexibility first approach is the lowest cost pathway to decarbonize. So here's a little video to show how, UK Power Networks plan to deliver net zero in a short-term future. So let me know if you can hear the sound, but it should come through.
Our ED2 business plan sets out how we will enable the transition to net zero within our regions. The UK has to reach net zero by 2050, but the next decade is going to be crucial in laying the foundations. How we will achieve net zero as a country is not fully certain. UK Power Networks' role is to ensure that our electricity networks are ready to support decarbonisation while spending our customers' money wisely. To achieve this, we must ensure that our networks are not a barrier to households and businesses making decisions on how to decarbonise, from how they will fuel their vehicles to how they will heat their homes. We need to monitor demand closely and be able to adapt quickly as circumstances change to ensure we have suitable network capacity available at the right time and in the right locations. We will get the best view of demand coming onto our networks by analysing data from a range of different sources, including consumer attitudes to EVs and heat pumps, data from third parties, and information from our ongoing engagement with customers and stakeholders. Then we will overlay this information with everything we know about our networks, where we're getting exceptional insight by deploying network sensors, using smart metering data, and filling the gaps with the help of artificial intelligence. We will improve the accuracy of our forecasts by working closely with local authorities who have the best view of what's happening in their local areas, by sharing data and developing local energy plans together. We'll use all of this insight to release capacity in the network when and where it's needed. We will look to maximise the existing capacity first, using clever technologies to keep costs down for customers. If we need to add more capacity, we will go to the market for flexibility from our customers, for instance by offering people the choice to charge their electric vehicles at a lower price at times when there is more capacity in our networks. Only then, when we know there is a clear need for it to keep us on track to meet net zero, will we invest strategically in new infrastructure. We will put early warning measures in place so we can respond if circumstances change. We've developed a whole series of performance indicators that we'll constantly monitor to make sure we're on track. These range from analysing the accuracy of our forecasts to measuring the customer experience for connecting EV chargers, heat pumps, or enabling renewable generation. This will give us a complete view of performance and, importantly, a feedback loop to keep improving our strategy and quality of our services. In order to make sure customers can make their transition to net zero, we need to invest in the network in the right place at the right time, using a range of different data sources. We need to work with local authorities to understand local needs, and we need a responsive regulatory framework to foster an approach that delivers this at the lowest cost for customers. That is what our plan for ED2 delivers. Our ED2...
Sorry, can you still hear me? Yep. Yeah, cool. Yeah, hopefully that gives a pretty short kind of like brief summary of our approach for kind of our flexibility approach in ED2. But let's look at a little bit of the history of how we came to where we are. So in 2017, we first published the Future Smart consultation, which really set out, what do the stakeholders think, we should be doing as a distribution system operator. And in 2018, we gathering all the feedback, we've published our flexibility roadmap, and held this stakeholder event to kind of consult about what do you think, is this the right thing to do, how what more do you want to see us to do, how can we like co-design to make this accessible and easy for everyone to participate. We're also not just doing this alone. We are part of the ENA, so the Energy Networks Association's Open Networks project. It covers more than the flexibility market element, but that is one of the main commitment in the collaborative project. So this is with working with other DNOs as well. And as of March last year, Sitigrid, which is the head of our the smart grid team, UK Power Networks, became the chair of the Open Networks project. So it's it's a very collaborative approach. So what is flexibility? I'm sure a lot of you in this room understand this concept, but as you can see in the video, when there's demand, we need to create capacity on the network. Flexibility is when we use capacity as a service instead of building more infrastructure. So instead of building more cabled substations as we traditionally would, we would want to go out to the market first to test if anyone can provide us a capacity as a service solution type. And then, so, what a flexible solution to us is, as long as it has the ability to change either the generation or the consumption in response to a corresponding instruction signal from UK Power Networks. So examples of flexible solutions include distributed generation, such as CHP or backup generators, battery storage, but it can also be designed demand side response, such as electric vehicles, heat pumps, or a building management system. So we'll go into an example of electric vehicles from one of our innovation projects to see how that can help shift peak demand and as a flexibility service. So we mentioned that earlier, we really do believe in a flexibility first approach. And what that means is it kind of translates to the three flexible service principles. We want to improve accessibility. As mentioned before, we are really looking to kind of co-design with whoever, whichever flex solution provider to understand, if is there any barriers for them to participate in the market, and how can, what can we do to help remove those barriers? We want to market test every solution. So, if before kind of committing to a CapEx type, like for example, building more assets, we want to go out to the market to say, can anyone provide flexibility service or any other service before we invest strategically in the network, because we believe that flexibility is a cheaper alternative. And lastly, we want to maintain to be a neutral market facilitator. We hence why we want to work, make it easy for anyone to kind of like quote unquote do business with us. We don't want it to be only limited to a certain handful of providers or technology type. We're technology agnostic, so we don't we want to maintain a neutral market facilitator, which we believe that will be the way to go for in order to enable and deliver net zero at the lowest cost for ED2. So this is probably a bit more detail of how how we actually procure flexibility. So this is a example of the flexibility service for the customer journey. So we run normally 2 tenders every year, and we, if you can see in the map, this little map showing all the different areas. So we will publish areas that would constrain on Picklo. So this is a platform. Obviously, if you're interested in any of that, like, don't hesitate to ask questions later, and there'll be more detailed information to show how like anyone can participate. I don't want to bore you with all the details like right now, but we, first we publish, the areas of constraints, so where we need to procure flexibility, and if you go on these go on the map and you see, oh, I have assets in this area, then there's a chance for you to participate. And it usually follows steps. Typical steps would be, we have a pre-qualification round where it's mostly to look at to register people to participate in the flexibility market, and then we go through a few assessments. There's some obviously kind of like financial registration with the flexibility contracts, and then award contract. We do some technical testing to see your response time and all the nitty-gritty details, and then you can start delivering. So that's just kind of a quick example of how how someone would contract with UK Power Networks to provide flexibility. So I have a question for the audience, just to keep it a little bit more interactive. So we've started our tenders in 2019. We had 2 rounds every year, so 2019, 2020, 2021. Just as a high-level guess, how many megawatts do you think we've contracted in 2021? You can just type it in the chat.
I'll be interested to see if anyone is prepared to answer that.
It's a guess. It's fine. It's just something to kind of think about. But I'll reveal the answer here.
Well done, people.
I actually can't see the answer, so I'm going to.
Well, Carol, we got answers ranging from 3 gigawatts all the way up to 800 gigawatts. So there's quite
the
a bit
average.
spread,
It's correct. So last year we contracted 350 megawatts of flexibility service. And that is so in 2021 that was the largest we've seen in the country. So it was very exciting time. So you can see that the journey from 2019, where we had like just less than 20 megawatts, to last year having like 350 megawatts. So it's a growing market, and this is obviously also a result of us like continue to engage with over 1,000 stakeholders throughout the years to understand what else how can we make it easier for you to participate. And a large proportion of those contracts were actually EVs and domestic storage. So that's that. Now I mentioned I would talk a bit more about a project on smart charging for electric vehicles and how that's a kind of an example of flexibility at residential level. And we've actually just kind of published the final report on this project. And this was like my baby and when I was still in innovation. So I'm happy to talk about, really happy to talk about this project. So the project Shift was really about kind of shifting peak demand using shifting the kind of typical evening EV charging to avoid charging at peak. But we also understand that the DNO shouldn't have the red button to tell people when to charge or when not to charge. So we wanted to design a market mechanism for a third party, which could be a service provider or supplier, to come in and design how they want to incentivize customers to respond to the signal. So as the project, we designed market mechanisms between us, UKPN, and the suppliers to create kind of financial incentive for them to use electricity when the network capacity is available. And then these service provider will create a customer propositions to incentivize their customers. It could be smart tariffs or whatever it is, points on their app. So we'll see. So in the trial, there are three different mechanisms that we trial. So we work with Kaluza, Octopus, and EV.Energy as the three main suppliers. And we've trialed, so for example, with Kaluza, it was a time of use duos. So it's kind of a form of the time of use tariff. So for obviously the network peaks, it'll be a bit more expensive, and then less expensive during off peak. And with Octopus Energy, we trialed a kind of a capacity-based pricing. So it's almost like they booked, they said, I'm going to use this much capacity. If they exceed it, there's a penalty. So, it's kind of up to them to optimize that to make sure they only use what they booked. And then EV.Energy, the trial was the more, I guess, typical like flexibility procurement. So they are contracted to only charge within a certain window, and they have to incentivize their customers to, they have that relationship with the customer to understand how we can shift it to avoid that peak window. And so in summary, we saw that in the trial, from two out of the three suppliers, we saw that 79% of peak demand reduction. So it was, a success. We successfully shifted them away from the peak, or 79% of the peak was reduced. And we saw that 85%, customers chose smart charging for 85% of the time. So, whatever their proposition was, or whatever they need to shift away from. So 85% of the time that was successful. There was some override, some people some of the smart charging was overridden because they are still given the boost function. So obviously we didn't take that away from the customer, saying no, there's no way you can charge whenever you want. But if you let if it's convenient for you, you could let us do the smart charging for you. But if there's emergency or you think you need like a boost and you're like you can definitely override that. But we only saw 15% of the time that was actually used. And so with smart charging, we saw that, like I said, the average evening peak decreases. But there was an inflection point, like due to clustering behavior. So this is probably getting a bit too detailed, but if too many people kind of do it, you might shift it to like kind of like create a new peak. And that's specifically the case for demand profiles with so if a household already has overnight storage and we're kind of incentivizing to shift to the overnight peak, overnight time, so then that will actually create a second peak. So when we're designing the trial, it was more designed around electric vehicles, but it will be interesting to see, well, what if the house also have electric vehicles and like storage heating, or other types of overnight storage? Like, how can we kind of redesign this to incentivize them away from the peak? It doesn't necessarily have to be the evening peaks. But it was still interesting to see that we could incentivize people to shift, and there is value in doing so. And the biggest takeaway from all the trial is that us at the end of the trial, the shift result provided like a different baselining methodology, and that was something that the EV flexibility provider like kind of asked for, and was happy to see that because there are many different ways to kind of baseline your consumption when you want to provide flexibility, and we have something that's specific for the EV providers, and that was like kind of the main success story from Shift, and how that kind of helped develop further our flexibility market. So I've talked about quite a few things, and what do you think? You obviously use the chat to share your thoughts. I'm sure many of you have done. I've seen a lot of comments in the chat, but happy to take any questions, I think, after the next presentation.
Thank you so much, Carol. I think what I'd like to do is that Philip Coventry from Community Energy England and Roger Davies have a question which I think might just inform further questions. So Philip, could you just open your, so we'll just have that one question for now, and then we'll hand over to Jeff. Philip, could you just unmute yourself and share yours and Roger's question, please?
Sure, yeah. Thanks. I feel cheeky because I'm jumping on Roger's question, but
sorry, Roger.
Basically, it would just be really helpful to understand, because there have been a couple of small trials with community energy getting involved in exactly what you said about the mechanism of shaping the change in demand of consumers. But from your trials in particular, it would be useful to understand the equipment that was necessary to bring about the communication between the network or the supplier and the consumer, and actually control. So in your case, was it a request and then the consumer had to act, or was it an automated system of some kind that was controlled deliberately? So I know you said you have the override. So yeah, it would just be useful, because I think people who are listening and thinking whether their organization can get involved in this, I think that's the bit that the community energy organization would need to understand and provide in order to kind of get involved in this. So that would be very helpful to know. Yeah.
So the control, quote unquote, control bit was actually between the supplier and the customer. So for example, we don't override, like the UKPN didn't like do any overriding of the customer. So it was kind of the propositions between the customer and the well, in this case, Calusa, Octopus, and EV.energy. So I think it was a mix of kind of like automatic, like your schedule for this time, and then if the customer overrides, then it will just bumps them down off the list. And I think some of them might be more manual. From our point of view, like how then the supplier respond to UK Power Networks. I think Zaheen, if you're on the call, I think you might be better supposed to answer that part. Yeah.
I think Zaheen had real problems coming in. Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I was had my headset in the wrong position. Hi everyone. Hi Philip. Yeah, thanks for your question. Yeah, so just to add to what Carol said. So in terms of, I think Carol's given a good summary of how it worked on the Shift innovation trial. In terms of our kind of business as usual flexibility tenders, if you wanted to participate in those, the way we do the interface between UKPN and our flexibility providers is basically there's some scope for flexibility, for want of a better word. So we have some providers who have working with a more kind of automated approach. Essentially, there's an API, an application programming interface, whereby we send an instruction to the provider, who may be an aggregator of smaller assets, or maybe managing one large asset, and then there'll be like a kind of automated control of the asset off the back of that API. But the majority of our flexibility providers, and we facilitate this within our procurement framework, they use a kind of email approach. So essentially it's very simple. We send an email saying, we need this amount of flexibility between these times, say 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. You tell us what you can provide within that period in terms of your capability, and then we'll go ahead and then issue an instruction again by email to let you know exactly how much flexibility we want, and then we'd expect you to go ahead and deliver that. And then all the kind of the monitoring of your delivery and calculation of payments, etc., is all done ad hoc after the utilization event. So it'll be on a kind of monthly basis. We'll figure out how much you delivered when we sent an instruction, and then pay you based on that. So yeah, there's kind of in that second process I mentioned, it's all based on emails, and there's not a very big technical barrier to participate. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I mean, I think I know a bit more about the second part of your explanation already. I'm sure be helpful for people here, but mostly I was thinking about the first one in terms of the domestic trials, because I think that's one of the key routes for community energy to get involved in this kind of aspect of the network, because the way community energy works is being locally based, and so that kind of domestic engagement is what we're very good at. So I think that the technological route into it is really important. So thanks for explaining.
Thanks, Philip. We've got loads of really good questions coming up, but before we start putting them into the pot, I'm going to hand over to Jeff, because I think what he has to offer, I think, with my understanding, but I could be wrong, complements this. So Jeff, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Cheers, Liz. Let me just check. Great, can you see that? Can you all see that on the screen? Great, thank you. Great, so just a quick introduction. My name is Jeff Whittingham. I am the CEO of Sitigrid. I joined Sitigrid in the summer of last year. Prior to that, I was the interim chief executive of Robin Hood Energy, which was owned by Nottingham City Council. And I sort of steered that business from into sort of selling the customer base to Centrica, and then found a sort of convenient way out for the council with that business. I'm still an advisor to Nottingham City Council on that district heating network and their municipal waste contract as well. Prior to that, I was the managing director of Ørsted's energy supply operations in the UK. And I guess you can tell by the grey hair, I've spent an awful lot of time in the electricity industry. And to be honest with you, I'm very passionate about the electricity industry. And I guess I recognise, and we have conversations that Carol's just been through, I recognise that this industry is on a significant tipping point into a net zero world, a world in which, houses will become prosumers, they'll be an asset, they'll provide flexibility services for which you'll be remunerated for. And in our opinion, you will also trade energy locally on a peer-to-peer basis. For me, in the future, there's 3 revenue streams for a community energy project. One is, the first revenue stream is peer-to-peer trading between local generation and local customers. Secondly, the trading of green certificates, which is not really valued today at a domestic level. And thirdly, what Carol's been taking us through is quite a complex market around flexibility services. And those services are for both the DNO, UK Power Networks, and the ESO, which is the national grid as well. So there's various levels of sort of flexibility services that you can offer. So let me tell you a little bit about Sitigrid and the mission that we're on. So Sitigrid is a clean tech company. We're enabling the transition to a net zero economy by creating local equitable electricity markets. And the word that I always bring out here is the word equitable. To be honest with you, having worked in this industry for this long, I don't think these markets are equitable. They were never designed for the new world, never designed for the new world. And so that therefore there needs to be something different. The market needs to operate in a different way. And I think that that is coming. So where are we today? Well, The electricity market in the UK is broken. Something needs to change. There has to be a different way of doing things. And I know that probably the reasons you're on this call is because you want to do something differently, whether that's build a community energy scheme or you've got other interesting areas. But, you know, look at the price. I mean, we're going to see a price cap of £2,900 coming in from October. That's guaranteed. It could be 2,800, it could be 3,000, but it's going to be around £2,900. If we have a severe winter, what's going to happen to people? How are people going to be able to afford to heat their homes? We have a world in which there is an element of greenwashing around green tariffs. Now, there is a debate about this, and you buy certificates to match against your demand, but not in real time. There's no correlation between the certificates you buy and the energy demand that you use. The energy market is not designed for prosumers. I agree both with Carol and with the UK PN team that flexibility services are coming, and that will provide you with additional revenues for your community energy scheme, but they're not designed today for prosumers. And you look at the solar export guarantee, look at that. So look at the way that energy prices have increased. Look at how the solar export guarantee has increased in line with that. I don't see movement in that world. And so therefore there's insufficient incentives for distributed renewable generation, which we need for flexibility. We need to make energy cheaper. So we believe strongly that the way forward is to create local electricity markets, and that's local community energy schemes. Energy suppliers will be asked to facilitate these schemes. So you're still going to need in the mix people who can provide billing services, customer services, and pick up the phone to answer questions. So there's going to need to be an energy supplier. And these local markets operating with flexibility, with green energy, etc., can be a housing estate, can be a village, a whole community, a city, or even a whole region. You know, so if you like, in UK PN's world, that might be the whole of East Anglia becomes a local electricity market. And it needs a level of technology to facilitate those markets. And we believe that those markets will deal with thousands upon thousands of small generators in the future and millions of local customers. And it will start, the revolution in this space will start with the build out of local community energy schemes. So basically a local market connects basically generation assets to customers in a local area. And there's, as I've already said, there's a number of different revenue streams. Firstly, at its basic level, it's producing electricity at the generation point and supplying that generation to the customer at a price which basically remunerates the generator probably more than they get today and reduces the cost to the consumer, which seems a really great solution. And to be honest with you, it is an answer to one of the problems that we face today. This will be a two-stage settlement process. So one of the people who works with me in this business is a guy called Mark Bygraves, and he used to be the CEO of a company called Elexon. And Elexon managed the national electricity systems. So basically they make sure that all the electricity that's generated and all the customer consumption is settled correctly, settlement engine. We're talking about a local settlement engine, an engine that settles first at a local level. So it makes sure that you use all your local green generation first, whether it be spilled off the roof of somebody's house or whether it's a solar farm in the locality, and then you import electricity from the national grid or from national settlement systems. Making a link to the UK PM presentation, we can also aggregate a number of players together to provide network services. And as Carol's explained, you know, that might be to remove the need for building more wires or reinforcing more wires. It might be to provide local frequency or flexibility services. So there's a number of different things that that digital platform can deliver. But at its heart, it matches a generation unit to a local customer. Okay, and by doing that, within the rules of the game as they exist today, we can generate value for both sides of that equation. It's a simple business model. It's digitally matching consumers and prosumers together through technology. And if you like, that mirrors to some extent what the theoretical electron flows would be across the distribution network. It's about the digital matching of consumers and prosumers. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of the sort of facets of our technology solution. So sometimes when you build strategies in the electricity industry, you come across something and you think, actually, that's pretty damn simple. And one of the things that you don't do in the electricity industry is you don't match one generation meter to one demand meter. Everything's done on an aggregate level. Our system will match on a peer-to-peer basis across the network, one generation unit either to one customer or to thousands of customers, depending on the size of the generation unit. So we match customers and generators. So, and I think it's an important point from the UKPM perspective. It's like back in 2007, I was the strategy director at United Utilities, and the CEO of the business stood up and said, who believes that going green can also mean that you can make more money? And interestingly enough, in 2007, a lot of people put their hands up, but I suspect it's because that's what the CEO believed. But actually you can do this, you can make money out of this. And so where do we produce the value? Well, there's three areas where we produce the value. One, just peer-to-peer matching, paying the generator more than the solar export guarantee, the customer pays less for it. You don't send that energy to the national supplier at 2p, they repackage it up for you and send it back at 30p. That doesn't happen. So you can do it across, miss the middleman out almost during that period and just connect those two things together. We use two other things that are existing rules. One is what's called supply exemption. So as a generator, you can make your electricity generation exempt of policy costs. So you can supply it into the locality and those customers can be supplied without paying what's called the FIT tariff subsidy, CFD subsidy, capacity market subsidy, or REGOs and ROCs, renewable obligation certificates. That's worth about £40 a megawatt hour. That's to be shared between the customer and the generator. There's a third scheme that you can use, and that is called complex sites, where you have a substation, you have a generation unit supplying into that substation, and you might have 500 customers. You can net off the generation and the supply together, such that the industry only sees the balance and not both sides of that equation. Both of those can generate significant value. They're here today, and it can be done today to start building these community schemes. So how do we see local markets developing? Today, the electricity market is 350 terawatt hours. That's a huge market in the UK for electricity. And in 2050, that market will rise, we think, to around 700 terawatt hours. Well, how does it rise? And Liz asked me a question yesterday on this. It goes there because you decarbonize heat, you decarbonize electricity, gas disappears off the network or is a marginal fuel, and everything is electrified. We believe that local electricity markets driven by community energy schemes will go from around 7 terawatt hours today, and that's likely private wire schemes that don't sit on the distribution network, to community energy schemes and local authorities building out local electricity markets. So we think the first place this starts is with community energy schemes. You start building out these schemes around the country, and it's great to see different people from different geographies around the country. Also, I believe that local authorities, and having had the Robin Hood experience, I think one of the things that local authorities can do is to say, I've got some local generation assets, I've got some social houses, I want to link those two things together. I want to enable a local electricity market in my city. And I want to do that digitally and connect assets. And I want to tell people, if you want to invest in some generation, build it here in my city, and I'll connect you to our civic buildings. I'll connect you to my social housing. So we can build out this sort of spider's web of different small local markets. We can also connect those markets together digitally. So if you've got a community energy scheme, you've got excess generation during a period, we can then supply that into another community energy scheme digitally through the settlement systems and create a matching process there. How much value can we create? And I think value is really important here. We're not talking about having to subsidize this at all. What we're talking about here is a market where in 5 or 6 years' time, we could be generating, say, just under £500 million worth of value for a market that will be 10 terawatt hours. Remember, I said that the total market at the moment was 350 terawatt hours. So that just gives you an idea of the total value available between generators and suppliers and customers. So we can facilitate flexibility. We can also facilitate green tokens, and we can also facilitate peer-to-peer trading, which means that you can generate value in your community energy schemes. We hold a relatively small key in this space, but I'm absolutely sure it's a key that unlocks the last box of value. It's industry transformational. It democratizes electricity. It puts the power to the people at a local level. It enables net zero. It is a settlement engine, and I didn't go into that, but it's an engine, a digital engine that is highly scalable and has incredible low marginal costs for each trade, such that if you spill half a megawatt hour onto the grid, or even less than that, we can pick that energy up and trade it with your next door neighbor, your family, a charity, somebody who's got fuel poverty problems. It can be done. It's a substantial growing market, as I've demonstrated, and if it works in the UK, it will work across other geographies as well. So that's Sitigrid, and that's what we're about. That's me finished, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Right, we've got lots of questions that have come up in the chat box, and I apologise if I don't say the questions in the most logical order. My sense was that Sayan, I don't know how to pronounce your name properly, was that your question might be a good start, a good launch point. I think it was a question for UK Power Network, Sayan.
Apologies. Yeah, I switched off my video because I'm in the garden, because it's a beautiful day.
Yeah. Okay.
So what, we've been hearing the terms flexibility, peer-to-peer trading. So I work as a consultant to help out the either individual businesses or the business part, or a set of consumers, and to reduce their emissions and benefit from the market. Well, I feel like we are not tapping into that potential, and I feel like we're restricted by the options provided by the utilities. So I will be very interested to hear about the options available to the small consumers, because my understanding from the UK Power Network is basically you are dealing with your customers are the utilities, your supplier is the utility, so you don't deal at the consumer level, which is understandable. But at the same time, so while there seems to be a lot of exciting stuff is happening, I feel like we're not really tapping into that opportunity yet. So that was my question, basically.
Thanks, Sam. I feel the same way, actually, and I was quite impressed that the 10 kilowatts, you could manage 10 kilowatts of flexibility, but I still don't quite, even with these presentations, I don't quite understand the process of how a community energy group could engage with that and make that happen. So I'll hand over to Carol and Jeff, and are you pronounced Zain or Zahin?
Zahin.
Zahin, right, and I'll hand over to, and Jason, of course, I'll hand over to all four of you to answer that.
Yeah, I'll take a first, and then my colleagues can jump in to add more stuff. But so we obviously want to facilitate and enable as many people to participate as possible, including all the way down to kind of residential level, which is why we had projects like Shift, and the conscious decision to kind of not kind of use your word, deal with the customer directly. It's not, it's more because we don't want to be kind of dictating when they can and cannot charge. So that was more from how do we incentivize this to make it a more market-based solution? Because obviously we shouldn't be the one deciding, well, someone can have a swimming pool but you can't charge your EVs at peak time. So that was more we have a constraint here. This is the signal. This is we need capacity in this time, and whoever can provide a solution to that, like we'll just facilitate that. Obviously, we understand that there are different types of barriers for like smaller load to participate, and we're happy to continue to co-design that. And again, part of the reason why we had Shift and then we have a new baselining method for EV providers is because we heard that feedback, and also we've reduced our kind of threshold to join. I think previously, Zahin, correct me if I was wrong, was 100 kilowatt for even aggregators to bid in, and now we've lowered that to 10 kilowatt, and it can be aggregated like individual assets aggregated. So that's, understand that that's not all the barriers there are, but that was kind of how we approach these things. So definitely happy to hear what more can we do. Like we're still developing a lot of the markets in this space, so it's quite flexible in our approach. So Zahin, anything more to add?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think Carrie, you've covered most of it. So in terms of like the route to participation for community energy projects, so what we've seen so far is when we've had kind of smaller flexible assets participating in our tenders, often they have been through aggregators, and I think the reason, that's not something that we've dictated, but the reason I think we've observed that is because a lot of these smaller kind of domestic flexibility, for example, they don't really have the kind of capacity to, for instance, accept dispatch signals from UKPN, or they don't have the means to go through the settlements process with us and get paid, etc., directly. So all of these kind of systems that are needed, although we don't think they're very like high spec systems or represent large barriers to participation, I think for like smaller kind of consumers, often it is easier for them to participate through aggregators, even if aggregators are taking a cut of the benefit out of flexibility services. Having said that, as long as you can meet our kind of technical thresholds to participate, which again I would emphasize aren't particularly onerous, there is nothing preventing kind of smaller consumers participating directly in our tenders. So if you are interested in that, we would be happy to arrange kind of one-to-one surgeries, which is typically what we do. I think Carol, I don't know if we gave the contact details, but you can email us at flexibility@ukpowernetworks.co.uk, and we can set something up and we can talk about how do we facilitate participation from smaller consumers, because we fully understand this is going to be essentially a big part of the future of the net zero transition, is going to be smaller consumers transitioning to low carbon, more flexible technologies, and actually becoming active participants in energy markets. So we are very keen on facilitating that, and if there's anything that we can do, which we aren't already doing, to facilitate direct participation from those kind of providers, then we're very, very keen to hear that feedback.
Liz, can I just add something just on this? Is that possible? So there's two areas where you can earn money with flexibility. One is the distribution network operator and the national grid operator, but also there's a price arbitrage as well. So the world's going to look very different. A lot of the time you may provide flexibility services and there is absolutely no disruption or change to your supply. So for instance, say if your fridge is connected as a connected device, then the distribution network operator could send out a signal and actually switch your fridge off for 5 minutes or even less than that to help balance the local grid. You won't even know. You will not even know it's happened. You could have a hot water storage tank. And so therefore, when prices on the grid go negative, and don't forget, one of the reasons we need flexibility is not only for smart grid management, it's because in the future, we're going to have a network, an energy system that's filled with renewable energy, which is intermittent and unpredictable. But let's say there's lots of wind on the system, the price goes negative, and a control box in your house says, okay, price is negative, put it into the hot water tank, because you can store it as hot water. So there's not only DSO services, there's also price arbitrage opportunities. So one of the key things is to build a flexible system to take advantage of all of these different revenue streams in the future, where you can reduce your total electricity bill. You're talking about earning money from your assets to reduce the cost of electricity in your house. Okay, thanks, Liz.
Thank you. So there's lots of relevant questions going on in the chat box. So I'd like to,
yeah, the first one we'd like to ask, Roger Davis asked, are there any regulatory or other obstacles? And Roger, do elaborate on that if you wish. And this, I think you put this question to Jeff.
And then we'll hand over to, before answering, can we hand over to Ian Davies, who has quite a few questions, partly about Ofgem. It looks like, anyway, I'll hand over to Roger and Ian.
Well, if Roger can ask first, and then Ian after
yeah,
Roger,
and then answer.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, it was really just a quick question. I mean, the model that Sitigrid describes sounds absolutely fantastic, and you can see that it fills a real, provides a real opportunity in the local market development and getting communities together to share their facilities and share the benefits. So my question is it available now, or are there regulatory or technological or other hurdles that have to be overcome before it can actually be rolled out?
Okay, so it is available now. So these rules have been in place for the last 20 years. To some extent, you know, being a time-served energy person, I probably wasn't fully aware of them until I started sort of unpeeling the onion, if you like, and trying to sort of get down into what's called the Balancing and Settlement Code and really find out where the value is. There are people who use these rules today. Okay, so there was and I see Octopus are on the call as well, but there was an article about a wind farm called Windy Peat, and that is with Energy Local, and that was a 50 kilowatt wind turbine that connected to 17 homes. And when the wind's blowing, they distribute the energy to those customers, but digitally, it's nothing to do with the physical flow. And when the wind's not blowing, they import electricity via Octopus to sort of top up their electricity supply. And they're using a system called complex sites and supply exemption, which is what we intend to use as well. Now, one of the questions in the chat box was quite right. It sort of said, but what's the regulatory risk here? You know, so if there's sort of, you know, in economic terms, some free riders here who are not paying policy costs, what ultimately happens to the system? So we've had discussions with BEIS, and we've had discussions with Ofgem about this, because clearly it's in our interest to ensure that there is some support for these schemes. And what we told BEIS is how are you going to stimulate local green generation? You know, people aren't building solar schemes anymore, really, to export anything. So actually, you know, and you want local generation. So why don't you put aside a certain volume of electricity, say 50 terawatt hours, and don't forget this market's going to grow really big, and say that's exempt of policy costs to stimulate the build out of green generation. There's a bill going through Parliament which is supporting local electricity markets. I'm not sure how many people are aware of that. And there's a lobby group called Power for People. That bill has got over 300 MPs supporting it. It's a private member's bill. It needs 400 signatures. And, you know, I would sort of recommend that it's in community scheme interests to see that bill go through. And even recently, when Boris Johnson was talking about building out local generation assets, he said, if people accept it in their area from a planning permission, they should benefit from that asset. This is exactly what we're talking about. Why, if I build a local generation unit, does it have to be linked in any way, shape or form to the Ukraine in terms of the way that energy is priced? It doesn't at all. It bears no correlation with that. You want a return on that asset, and that's what you're looking for. So build out local generation, create a fair price and connect it to customers. I think there will be some challenges around the regulatory framework, but ultimately it addresses affordability, supply security and decarbonisation, which should be at the heart of government policy, and it has been for the last 20 years plus.
Okay, I'm going to, Carol, do you have any comments? There's lots of debate going on about tariffs and the figures still not really adding up.
Okay.
Going on in the chat box. So, but do UKPN have any other comments, or shall I hand over to Ian Davies?
I think I'm happy to.
Okay, Ian.
Hi, hi everybody. Yeah, my background, important, I worked for the South Wales Electricity Board from the age of 16. Then I went to Duracell, and then I was the solar PV renewable energy manager for Southampton City Council, putting a megawatt of solar on the building. So I've been in the industry since I was 16, I'm now 62. So we started Southampton Renewable Energy. We went to the conference in Plymouth in 2017, and I sat with the regen manager, and our financial model was built obviously on avoided costs of CCL, the FIT levy, and she said that was being reviewed by Ofgem because it was unfair with fuel people in fuel poverty, and that could be reduced at any time. The FIT could be changed. Why? You know, we've had a windfall tax coming in on energy companies. So we were looking to build solar PV canopies on school playgrounds and sell it to the school for 25, 30 years. The community benefits, communities would buy shares. But if the government or BEIS withdrew those policies, changed it, it would cripple, well, the financial model wouldn't work. So this is always in the background. So Jeff, I hear what you're saying, but I just don't trust our government. You know, I'm not political, I'm from Wales, my parents are Labour. I'm just looking at positive outcomes.
Yes.
And I'm worried. I'm just concerned that I've been in community energy now since 2016. And, you know, going forward, it could ruin any of this. And I'm sorry to, you know, be a doubter, but, you know, I think we have to.
I'm going to stop you there. I think we all share your concerns and share your views, but I'm going to, we've got a lot to get to. There's lots of questions. So thank you for your observations, which I think are shared by many. Can I hand over to Ian Smith now, who also had quite a few comments, and thank you, Ian.
Well, my comment was really to Jeff is, I haven't had dealings with Energy Local for some time, but my understanding of their exemption is that it only applies if the generator and the customer or customers are downstream of the same 11 kV node. Correct. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so I mentioned two ways of generating value. Okay, you're quite right. That is what's called a complex site solution from a balancing and settlement code. That's what they're doing. It's one substation and it's generation into the substation and supply out from that substation. So you group those customers together in what's called a complex site. It's historically been used for large businesses, actually. So this was probably one of the first times it's been used at a domestic level. However, there's another rule called supply exemption. And actually that generator can be located in the north of Scotland and the customer can be located in the south of in Cornwall. And you can digitally connect the two things together through the settlement system and achieve the values that I'm talking about. And that is in the existing rules of the game. And that's why I've got the ex-CEO of Elexon alongside me, because I want to make sure that I've got that right. I'm also trying to bring on board somebody who's been very senior from a regulatory perspective as well to support us. So the value generation is possible. Yes, it's vulnerable to regulatory change, but as I say, there's a groundswell of opinion and the discussions that we've had. A bill going through Parliament, read that bill and see what it means for community energy schemes. I think it's a catalyst for you.
Okay. Do UKPN have any comments? And if not, if you do, please comment. If not, I want to hand over to David Watts.
Oh, good morning. Yeah, thanks all for the presentations, really interesting. I work for the Energy Saving Trust, and in particular sort of work on the Welsh Government Energy Service Programme, which we're partners in providing for Welsh Government. Obviously very interested in this as a means to provide an equitable energy transition. I sort of flagged up a question earlier just about sort of heat networks as sort of perhaps as another option for aggregating as well. And yeah, thanks I think to Jason who responded to that, and I think mentioned Luxembourg, but just looking at heat networks as an alternative route for aggregating consumers and thermal storage as part of that, so sort of central thermal storage. So just what sort of work that's going on on that, so how much potential that might have, but stressing where heat networks are an appropriate solution as well, because they won't work everywhere.
I think it's worth saying there that there's significant interest from BEIS. I think currently heat networks represent around 3% of the total demand in the UK, and they were talking about moving it to something like 17%. So there's a lot of grant funding to establish these schemes. You know, I personally work with one of the biggest in the country. So we have 5,000 customers connected in Nottingham to the municipal waste plan, where we generate the heat and supply 5,000 fairly socially sort of deprived areas with low cost heat basically, and also electricity into the area. So I'm a big supporter of distribution networks, heat distribution networks. I think they're expensive to establish, high capital costs, but there are subsidies out there to build out those schemes.
Carol?
Yeah, no, it's probably the same. No worries. Yeah, I think again, like we're technology agnostic, so as long as the solution can flex up or down generation or consumption, like you're definitely like welcome to participate. And if there's any specific problems or well, it doesn't work for us because X, Y, Z, then yeah, we're happy to chat about that. So definitely no reason why you can participate from our point of view.
Zaheen?
Yeah, just to add to that, yeah. So we have definitely had some interest from not necessarily heat networks as such, but thermal storage participating in flexibility tenders. So for instance, solutions with heat pumps and thermal storage, essentially tearing down the heat pump and using the thermal store to deliver heat to the site, and therefore reducing load on the network. We've had some serious interest in from those kind of solutions before. Nothing has, I don't think, materialized into actual contracts yet. But again, as Carol said, we're very keen to facilitate those kind of innovative solutions, especially where there's some sort of interaction between different networks, whether it be heat networks, water networks, etc. So we would encourage you to look into our tenders and again have a face-to-face meeting with us. Let us know if you'd like to do that, and we'd be happy to talk through things in a bit more detail.
Thanks, Zaheen. I've got Nick next. I've got so many people in the office here today who has questions both for UK Power Networks and Jeff. So I'll hand over to Nick.
Hello, I've got a system with a Tesla battery. I'm not sure whether this is unique to how Tesla batteries work or whether other people can. But the arrangement is that I have true net metering. I get paid 11.1 pence for every kilowatt hour exported, and I'm charged 11.1 pence per kilowatt hour for every kilowatt hour imported. As a result of that, it doesn't really bother me when the battery is charged or discharged, and Tesla have the ability to turn on my battery and discharge it at times when the electricity peak. So every day they make sure that come 4 o'clock in the afternoon the battery is full, either by letting the solar charge it, or if they think it's a dull day, increasing the importing in and filling the battery. And then at between 4 and 7:15, they discharge the battery every day from 100% down to 20% for off-peak or off-grid emergencies. And the result is I get an amazingly low tariff. Now, are other battery types capable of doing this? And is anyone encouraging them to do it?
Quite techie question.
Is it with UKPN going first on that?
Jeff, you can take it. You can take it, and then we'll.
Well, the thing is, so on the Tesla battery, I think Tesla are one of the companies that probably is an outrider in terms of how much money they pay for the generation that's spilled into the grid. I think next down is, I think you're getting about 11p, you said. I think Octopus are quite high up there as well. It's about 7p, but then it goes.
It is via Octopus.
It is via Octopus, but Octopus facilitate the supply, if you like. So this is an example of an energy supply using your house as a prosumer, effectively. So that what they're saying is, I'll give you a fee, effectively, in the way that they've structured the price, an option fee, effectively, to be able to use that battery to make some money. Okay, so they will be, at the moment, it's quite a dumb battery, because what they're doing is they're just providing that service and discharging between 4 and 7 at night, and particularly on winter weekdays, that's when a lot of the charges will be applicable. But in the future, they could optimize that battery against the price, what Carol talked about in terms of flexibility services. So you might find that somebody says, it's a bit like sort of free solar. I just want to rent your roof. It's like, can I stick a battery in your house? And then what I'll do is I'll use that battery to reduce my charges to deliver energy to your house. That's what they're doing, basically. And it's a really good model. And it's sort of like it's like the opening of the window to what's coming next. So thanks for bringing that example through. That's a really good example of how flexibility and the use of different assets will reduce costs in the future.
Are different batteries technically capable of doing that?
The one thing I've looked at batteries, yeah. So I've looked at batteries. The problem is the controllers on these batteries are relatively dumb. So they're almost on a time clock. Whereas actually what you need is a more intelligent battery controller to be able to take decisions throughout the day. And that will be driven by an upstream energy suppliers trading team who are saying, I want to press the button now on all these batteries. So if you've got thousands of batteries across the UK, UK PM may say, actually, I'm very interested in the batteries you've got in this area. If you press the button at certain times, that will help us. So you can then dispatch flexibility into a local area. But at the moment, as I say, they're relatively dumb, the batteries, but they do need a controller that digitizes and allows opportunities to use that flexibility. One final thing, Octopus and National Grid did a trial this year. And they said, if anybody wants to shed load, if they've got a smart meter, if they want to shed load, we will pay them some money to enter that trial. Great. National Grid pressed the button on that, sent out a communication, and they got somewhere in the region of, I think, 20 megawatts of sheddable load, because it's like you have to go around your house switching stuff off. Okay. On the next time they asked, they got 10 megawatts. On the next time they asked, it sort of petered out. Whereas if you've got a battery, if you've got a controller, you can press that button and get that value every time. So the holy grail will be to be able to control your load. You don't see any difference, but they see a reduction in either the demand or even an increase in the demand at certain times to manage flexibility on the local network or the national network. Carol or any of the UK PN team, is there anything else you wanted to sort of?
Yeah, I can add something to that. So actually, it's really interesting what you said, Jeff, because we actually have contracts with Tesla in place.
Yeah.
And they have, and typically with domestic, so they're aggregating domestic consumers with a similar arrangement to what was described. And Octopus are the facilitator again. Yeah. And I think they are making kind of advancements with the control units for these domestic batteries, because one of the common services that are very popular with Tesla is our dynamic service, which essentially is, close to real-time service where we say half an hour before we need it, we'll say, oh, we need, this amount of flexibility, and then they're actually delivering under that service. So it's very much a kind of real-time activation of this domestic flexibility, which is very, very exciting. And yeah, Tesla again, they're I think one of the companies which are at the forefront of this. Yeah. As our Octopus. And in terms of like battery technologies, just from our perspective, again, like we have quite low thresholds for participation. So we require a minimum response time of like 30 minutes, which again is very amenable to most battery storage technologies. And yeah, we'd again say we're technology agnostic, and we can facilitate lots of different types of technologies in our flexibility centers. Yeah.
Thank you.
Carol, anything further?
No, I think Sahin covered it.
Can I pass over to Joanna then, who is here somewhere?
Yes, I'm here. So my question is around the occupants of rented properties. So I understand there is a lot of opportunities for owners of properties of solar PVs that they can install heat pumps, batteries, and all of that. But I was just wondering, is there a way for the tenants to take part in the flexibility measures? Because yeah, it's an indicator of deprivation. So reducing energy bills in rented properties through flexibility could be important for community energy schemes, because yeah, community energy is quite a broad term, and some of them are some of the groups are focused on reducing energy use and energy bills, energy efficiency measures. So yeah, that could be something possibly interesting for them.
Carol, you're looking like you might have something to say.
Yeah, it's a valid question. I mean, I'm renting myself, and I work on all these amazing things, and sometimes how can I participate actually? No, I think I'm not sure if we have anything specific in the flex side, but I know, I mean, we work very closely with our innovation colleagues who are always looking to make sure how do we get everyone into this transition, and I believe they have some like heat projects specifically looking at rented property, or property that doesn't have enough space or heat pump, or like how there are a few kind of like these specific segments, and I guess again like the renting sector is quite relevant in the London area that we serve. So there's definitely like works going on to remove barriers or increase or facilitate the participation. So if I don't remember on top of my head, but if I can find some more information for you, I'll like link you to the innovation team. Zahin, do we have anything?
Not really. I mean, I guess I would just kind of agree on the point that one of the kind of risks of the net zero transition is that it's going to be the kind of more affluent households which are going to have like flexible assets in place. These poorer households may not, and that's just going to potentially widen the gap between those who are more well off and those who aren't. And yeah, as Carol said, we have some innovation projects. One that comes to mind is Urban Energy Club, where we're looking at the benefits potentially of locating large battery storage on an apartment block, and then delivering the benefits of delivering flexibility through that large battery storage asset to the tenants within that block. And one of the challenges, there are a few different challenges. One of the challenges we found was just getting that kind of level of engagement from tenants in the kind of the concept of flexibility and getting benefits from that. So yeah, there's obviously a lot of engagement work which needs to be done around that, about getting kind of people who are less well off more engaged in the energy transition and understanding the benefits that potentially are out there from things like flexibility.
And I wanted to just add on this, actually. I work on the community project, which is looking to transition an off-gas grid community to electric heating with UK Power Networks. I can see that the rental market in an off-gas grid community will be able to participate more than possibly an on-gas grid community. You've got fridges, you've got hot water tanks more likely in an off-gas grid community, and you've got more likelihood of electric heating, which can be flexed. So you wouldn't see larger savings possibly, but you would see some smaller savings for these tenants. We also have social housing in Barkham, but quite a lot of them have got heat pumps fitted by the local council plus PV. So it's really worth having a look at how the houses are set up. But also it is also about, as Zahin said, it's about, the community engagement as well, and getting people engaged and in this whole process.
I need to contribute something now too, which is, as Carol says, she's part of the private rented market. I think most people under 40 are. They're not homeowners, and they really want to engage in sustainability and reducing carbon. So I think this question is a very, very valuable one. And yes, we can, or UKPN or whomever can engage with local authorities and people who have some form of housing stability because they're in council houses or housing associations. But there's an enormous sector of people that are in private rented, and it would be fantastic to find a way to engage with them. I don't know the answers, but I think it's a great question. And yeah, so Zaheen, please do share that particular case study. And I think it's something that in the community energy world, we should be looking at. Jeff, did you have something to say?
I guess I'm concerned, you know, obviously I work for Robin Hood Energy, which we set up for all the right reasons to try and help fuel poverty in Nottingham. But I worry about the flow of money that the government has given to people to put against their electricity bills. That's number one. Number two, you know, the social housing, you know, I'm sure that the person who owns the social housing will be the one who benefits from using those assets. They're the ones who are going to put the solar panels on the roof. And those benefits should flow to the individuals in some way, shape or form. And that's why I think the local authority has a role to play in making sure the benefits in whatever the government gives people or whatever we can do in terms of assets flow to individuals in those properties.
Yeah, I just want to come back, Jeff, and say that the houses that we know in Barkham, for example, and in the wider Lewis district area, the tenants benefit, the social housing that has PV and heat pumps.
Okay.
The tenants benefit from the PV, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, actually, I think that they benefit. I think they benefit from the use of the PV.
Yeah, free electricity at lunchtime.
Yeah, but do they get the?
They won't get the fix.
They won't get free. No.
Vanya, you have a question.
Hi there. Yes, so I've actually just joined the Octopus Flexibility team quite recently, but I've been working with the community energy side of the business for a while, so through Unity and also with Repowering London, and you know, I have a great interest in how community energy and flexibility can kind of match up and work together. And I guess my question is just, do you have like a plan to kind of standardize the process for community energy groups to participate in the flex markets, like compared to other DNO processes, just to make it like as simple as possible, I guess, for these groups to join? I know you said through like the process is usually through emails, but that might cause like a lot of admin for these groups. So maybe like an automated platform. I understand you're also on Piccolo as well, but not all DNOs are. So I guess that's just my question on like the plans for that.
Great question.
Yeah, so in terms of the kind of automated platform, so we do have somewhat of an automated platform in place. So we have like an API specification, which we'd be happy to send to you. Maybe I can take your details potentially if you could provide them. And that is basically, I guess, a first step. But I guess as we move into ED2, 2023 to 2028, we have actually committed to creating a neutral, what's the term we use? Basically a new market platform, which is going to facilitate, I believe, this kind of level of automation, which should make it easier for definitely certain types of provider to participate, including community energy schemes. And in parallel with that, we're also setting up something called a local area energy planning team, which again is going to be a dedicated part of our DSO, distribution system operator, which is going to be looking at, engaging with, for example, community energy projects and getting them into our flexibility tenders and participating in flexibility and planning infrastructure in a way which is going to be compatible with how we're developing the network. So I guess those are the two things I guess we're working on. I'm afraid I can't give you kind of much more in terms of that, but I can send you the API specification. I can also send you a link to our ED2 business plan where we talk about our new market platform and local area energy planning as well. So yeah, we have identified kind of community energy projects and local planning as a kind of key element of our DSO vision.
Okay, great, thank you. I'd really appreciate that.
I've just lost track of what I was going to say and ask. Carol or Jeff, do you have any further comments?
No, I think that's good answer from UKPN. Thanks, Zaheen.
Right. Well, I was half, Zaheen, as you were speaking, I was thinking, my question, we've got 6 minutes remaining. Just raise your hand or not. Do people feel clearer about what flexibility markets are? Do you feel any more enabled to engage with the flexibility market as a community energy group, or do you still have lots of questions? And everybody's been very silent. Just unmute yourself and let me know what you think. And holler, as Nikki says, yeah.
It's always encouraging, but of course we have lots of questions still.
Oh, Ingrid, you have your hand raised.
Sorry, you asked us to raise our hands if we wanted to show that we thought we knew more about this now.
Oh, great.
But we're working on a really interesting project with West Sussex County Council, the local energy communities in the 2Cs region, with partners in France, Belgium and the Netherlands. And as part of that, we were on a site visit earlier this week where PV had been installed on multi-tenanted apartment buildings owned by social housing. And the way how that was working in France was that the tenants would receive the benefits from, we were talking about how tenants of those kind of places won't receive the benefits. They get their electricity behind the meter, and so they only have to then import a smaller amount of what they would then have to pay. But I think that for social housing, I mean, social housing providers also need to make money so that they can provide adequate services and everything. And so if they can make energy cheaper for their tenants by providing PV, and they then make their money from using the facility, the flexibility services, I don't have an issue with that because it's still helping society. But yeah, that's me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ingrid. Anyone else? Oh,
my answer is yes to both parts of your question. Yes, I know a lot more, and yes, I still have a lot more questions.
Do feel free to put them in the chat box, Nick. So if no one else has anything to say, I'm going to give one last question. So when I worked with Nick and Nikki at Avesco, we had a bunch of schools on our books. So they use all of their solar electricity during the week, and at weekends they don't use their solar electricity. Just literally, physically, how would we put that into a flexibility bid?
Okay, so probably this is more of a technical point on solar PV. So if there's a standalone solar PV without battery storage, given that most of our flexibility tenders are in relation to demand constraints on our network, where we've got too much demand or too little generation, we haven't actually had participation from solar PV plants before, and actually in a way they can't because they don't have that flexibility, if that makes sense, to by themselves without battery storage to change their level of generation. So especially in terms of increasing generation. So we're primarily looking for increasing generation to increase in areas where we have demand constraints, and because standalone solar PV technically can't really do that. Sorry, do you have a question, Liz?
All right, okay, I'm sorry, I might be making myself look really stupid here, but so, you know, say as a community energy group, it doesn't add up for us to invest in a battery in order to bid into the flexibility market. What would happen if, would there be a way that a bunch of community energy groups, a few kilowatts here and there, who aren't prepared, who don't have the funds to invest in a battery, what if UKPN were to have a little battery at some little site, you know, I can't remember what you call it, but it, and then, substation, thank you. And then all of our excess lunchtime electricity or weekend electricity went into a battery at that substation. Would that work?
That's a really interesting idea. So we actually do. I don't know, Carol, you maybe add something on this. Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, and no, that's a very interesting idea, and I think the idea itself, I mean, it could work. Unfortunately, DNOs are not allowed to operate battery, because obviously we would be able to skew the market, right, if we have our own kind of generation. So, but no, if but that's kind of what the Urban Energy Club project was looking at, like a community-owned, or like the kind of the social housing owned asset. So yeah, one person might not be able to afford, but so that's a good idea.
Liz, if I may add one final point to
Yes.
what Carol is saying. I've been going through the chat throughout this whole discussion, and I see lots of skepticism. Well, not skepticism. I see that everyone has their own little anecdote, or their own little example, or their own thoughts of what's going to happen if we have someone renting, or what are we going to do with excess PV, what are we going to do with this, what are we going to do with that. The thing is, there's no one size fits all approach. Like, everyone has their own needs, and it's very different to come today and say this is the answer for everything. But the thing is, there are organizations. For example, I also watched Jeff's presentation. It was very, very interesting, and I see that there's also lots of good ideas, a very good model, and a genuine, let's say, desire to make this work. And as Ahin said in an earlier question, we're always looking to engage with potential flexibility providers and find the solution that best works for them. So I hope that this discussion has, well, maybe it's not clearer what the solution is, but I hope that it's clearer that people who are looking to enable the flexibility market are very open to discussions. So we really encourage everyone who maybe whose interest may be picked a bit more after today's discussion, to come and discuss their own, maybe not tailor-made solution, but a solution that works for both parties.
Thank you, Jason. Jeff, would you like to say anything before we leave?
Just,
yeah.
I'm probably sounding like a broken record, but just get the best price by selling it into the local community. So I'd say it's not a flexible asset. As they said, it's an intermittent asset you've got, but you can sell any excess generation. Summer holidays, classically. So when the school's not there, you've got 6 weeks there. You've probably got about 10 to 12 weeks a year when the school isn't even there. So there is the ability to sell that energy at a better price than the price you will get from a large national electricity supplier.
Yeah, and just one more thing to add to that, also to what Jeff said and what Carol said. So I was talking mainly about demand constraints. So we are potentially going to be looking at more kind of generation constraints on our network at the moment. So at the moment, we're typically managing generation constraints through something called our DERM system. But increasingly, we're going to be potentially looking at market solutions to managing areas of our network where we've got too much generation. So in those scenarios, actually, solar PV may be a very beneficial participant in our tenders, where there is actually capacity to turn down generation and get benefit from flexibility markets in that way. So that's something maybe to look out for in the next kind of couple of years in terms of our flexibility tenders.
Ian Davies, you had something to say.
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, what the project we were talking about on solar canopies on schools, and it's a fallacy that they don't use any electricity during the summer holidays and things like that. Their servers run. You're right. In the business model, the SEG, the Smart Export Guarantee, was around about 6p. Now the cost of electricity has shot up, and I know one school I'm dealing with, it's gone from 19p and it's now up to 27p. So we want them to use electricity in the school, but when they export, the more solar canopies we have, that's then we do a power purchase agreement. That's what we were looking at. But the model was before the energy crisis. So I don't know what the Smart Export Guarantee is now, because I would need to plug that in. What is a realistic figure? Some of them would use an 80-20 split. That's half hourly data that I've analysed. So,
I think you're absolutely, Ian, that's absolutely right. Is behind the meter usage is the best energy to use. The next, for me, the next is to export it into the local area.
Yeah.
A better price than you're going to get on SEG.
Yeah.
And your last choice should be SEG or even a PPA. Remember that the energy companies really don't want solar. Okay.
No.
Because there's too much of it.
Yeah.
It's overstimulated through the FIT tariff, and everybody's jumped on that bandwagon and built big solar farms. So the energy suppliers are saying, I'll take it, but I'll only take it at a really low price.
Yeah.
Now, so miss them out and sell it locally, because that misses that national market out.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Anything else UK Power Networks would like to say? No?
Nope.
Any further questions? Maybe from Community Energy England? I'm conscious we've gone over time, so maybe we should just end it. But Philip, it's good to see you here. So anything further to say? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. I do hope you leave a little more informed, and I hope we can find some more ways to create some more projects. Thanks very much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you so
Cheers,
much.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.